I'd like to call to order the annual district meeting for the Fitch-Rona EMS district on October 19th, 2023, 7 p.m. Roll call, please.
Roberts.
Here.
Hilla.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Cronin.
Present.
Kaiser McHenry. Lonsdorf.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here.
Luganbull. Chief Anderson.
Here.
Deputy Chief Dostelet.
Here.
Thank you. Are there any public comments to discuss?
I did not receive any public comment for this year.
Moving to the next agenda item, which is the welcome. So thank you very much for attending the annual meeting. We appreciate the support for our EMS district. Next agenda item is to review and approve the meeting minutes from October 20th, 2022. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Second?
I second.
Any discussion or questions about the minutes? Then we'll move to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, nay. And then we have 2 abstentions, right?
I abstain.
And I abstain. All right, next item is we have a length of service recognition.
Thanks. So we got a couple of names here. I'll just click them all up here. So Andrew Jensen, he's one of our full-timers, but he started as a part-timer for us, but he actually hits his 10 years this year. I'll skip over Jeremy because he's here. We'll call him up here in a moment. Zach Kasdorf and Ben Wolter are both 2 part-timers for us, and they're both hitting their 5 years. But we'll have Jeremy come on up. You present that to Jeremy actually also started as a LTE with us. I think it was a fairly short time before he was picked up as a full-time medic with us. So Jeremy's celebrating 5 years with us.
Congratulations. Thank you.
And we have a pin as well. They were just buried at the bottom of the drawer. So we'll get you a pin in your certificate. So thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Right, moving on to the Chief's report.
All right, let me get it pulled up here. Too many things open. Sorry. There we go. So we actually do a staff photo about every 2 years just to kind of document in history. So that's just our current roster as of today. And then a little bit different with the Chief's report this time during our annual report, and it's a handful of more statistics that are just information for you. So every year when we apply for some state funding, we have to do an updated population from our municipalities. So this is as of January 1st of this year, our population, right, 51,585. It's about an increase of about 4,000 people over last year. So if you take our budget, we remove what we anticipate getting for run revenue. So the funds that are paid for then by the municipalities based on that population. So every resident in our district pays $40.07 for ambulance services in our district. We do get to see countywide. We compare that not all agencies participate, but we're fairly right in the middle of what most agencies in Dane County charge, the cost for EMS services. So I think whatever your feeling is, we're I think providing a fairly cost-effective service for our residents. If they're all paying $40 a person for our services. We grew a little bit. I didn't get to do the math update. We grabbed a couple more square miles up from the town of Fitchburg, or the town of Madison from last year, but 71 square miles, 3 ambulances 24/7, still have those 5 ambulances, 2 support vehicles, and a rehab trailer. So this is what our district looks like. The 3 stars show where all of those 3 stations are. The one in Verona, one out of Fitchburg Fire Station number 2 on Marketplace, and one out of Fitchburg Fire Station number 3 on South Saim. This is what our current staffing looks like. 21 full-time paramedics and 2 full-time administrative staff. That's myself and Jeff. We do have part-time office manager, Michelle, who helps us out greatly. We have a handful, missing a 5 in there. We have about 15 limited term paramedics, kind of working as part-time paramedics as well. We have a couple of EMTs that actually work for us part-time. We have 2 paid EMT interns and actually a couple of volunteers that still work with us. So the numbers that you normally see here, last month in September, so we were actually at 445 calls, up to about 21% from the month before. Handful of those did come from the Luke Bryant concert, but it's still a pretty, I think, 15?
I think it was 470 calls for the month in the computer, but 30 some of those were Luke Bryant concert responses that weren't transported, but that we took care of
Yes.
in the field hospital.
So it sounds like a good time was had by all. We're still up pretty significantly. I'm still shooting for about 5,000 calls by the end of this year. Statistics that you usually see right there, City of Fitchburg, about 65%, a little higher last month than they normally are. Breaking it down by municipality, just for last month, it was about 67% up in Fitchburg, so a little bit busier up here. Our usual fractal times that we try to keep under, I bring these up every month, but I don't know if you know this, if I remind you what those statistics are now. I do filter these out for calls that are within our district and calls that are patients who are ultimately transported by EMS. So I try to remove some of the filters when we go on intercepts. So if we head out to Mount Horeb, Belleville, Oregon, Monona, those are some significant drive times. So I pull those out just to really not skew that data too bad. So this is calls within our district. And then the reason I pick transported patients is because many times patients who are not transported, it tends to be, do you need help? Nope. And they leave, right? So it's less than a 60-second on-scene time. The other component of that is patients, some of those patients who end up not being transported tend to be a little more complicated, which means those scene times are a little bit more extended as we try to work through some of the logistics. So we look at that median time, and that's in minutes, so that's 1.55 minutes. That's not 1 minute and 55 seconds. So that's essentially 90 seconds by the time we get that page till the time we get out the door. En route to arrived on scene, so we're getting a median time within our district, less than 5 minutes, I guess showing that our stations are probably in the right spots. Put those two together, math doesn't quite work out, but fractal times, right? So by the time we are called to the time we arrive on scene, our median time is 6.63 minutes. On scene to transporting, so this is something we can manage some of the time, right? There's times where we don't ever want to compromise patient care just so we can get the wheels moving, but that is a number we shoot to be less than 15 minutes, and we are there. And then transport to destination, that is an uncontrollable time. It's probably actually has creeped up a little bit with all the construction, but our average transport times then are 15 minutes. Then at destination to back in service, so this is the amount of time it takes for them to turn patient care over, clean up the cot, restock, get back into service. That average time is 12 minutes. So if you add all of that up, it's roughly about a little under an hour and a half for the average out of service call time for our ambulances. When they get called out, it's about an hour and a half till they get back in service. So that can be pretty impactful when we talk about future growth. Right? So if all 3 ambulances go out, it's about an hour and a half-ish on average before somebody's going to be available to take another call, which means we're dependent on our neighboring services. We still use this system. We divide our district into quadrants. Not quadrants, I guess, because there's a lot more than 4 of them. We put them into squares, and we divide it into zones. This is kind of a best what we can do from the data. So if you see Fitchburg, that means an ambulance is responding from Fitchburg. And if you see Verona, that means an ambulance is responding from Verona, probably. So we don't ever know where that ambulance is coming from. So we just go by ambulance number. So 45 and 47 are Verona ambulances. So when they get called, that's the number we're picking, right, to manage those response times. Now, it's entirely possible that ambulance is driving down Fish Hatchery Road and they get a call on Fish Hatchery Road. It's still going to think that that's where that ambulance is coming from. But as we look at, because our district is made up of 5 different zip codes, right, and 3 different municipalities, this is a better way for us to manage, like, where should those stations be, about how long it takes us to get there. So as you can see, right, that bottom corner down there in Oak Hill, zone number 12, 1.87% of our calls, and you can see those places we don't go a lot, but you also know that those are fairly low residential areas. Probably 1.87 or 1.86 of those calls are Oak Hill calls. And then, zone 11, there's maybe 5 homes. So we don't go there a lot. You can see the Verona ambulance has never responded into that area. So I just want to kind of give you that, interpreting what this data means. And those stars are there based on where those stations are. This one, love something the state actually provides us some software. We're actually able to do some heat maps. So you can kind of see, if you're aware of our district, you know where those places are. So the big, the darker, the redder the color, the busier we are. So that upper right-hand corner that you see in the slide there, that's the Fish Hatchery Road corridor. You move down a little bit to that yellow there, that's the Chapel Valley area. If that big blotch from the way up-hand right corner, that's our new acquisition up there. That's the Southdale neighborhood. So that's the old town of Madison that came to Fitchburg. The other yellow spot you see right in the middle of there, that's the King James Way neighborhood. If we move to Verona, kind of the left side of the neighborhood there, the big orange sunspot up there, that's the large senior housing complex in Verona. That's North Edge Trail, Prairie Way Boulevard. And then if we head down to the south there, side of Verona where that yellow part is, that's actually the East Verona Avenue, West Verona Avenue. So there's some apartment complexes there. If you go south a little bit, there's a nursing home there. So you can see where we're going. The other blue spots are kind of spattered all throughout there. Any kind of questions from this map? Right. This is the map I really like that shows where we're going. Calls are usually, the information you usually see here every month, calls by hour of the day. Reason I like to point this out, especially at the annual meeting, is as we look forward to additional staffing in the future and we want to do some peak time ambulances, that is about the time that we're going to be looking at right there where we have our greatest amount of calls. We look at this every month, the reasons for dispatch, sick persons and falls, right, as usual, flips back and forth. We know consistency. Station number 2 is our busiest station. At least in September, it was busier, a little bit busier than it has in the past. Another number to point out, as you look at that mutual aid required year to date is up to 25. We added 8 more calls there in last month alone. So mutual aid required, that's separating. That's not all the times that somebody else has come into our district. That number is significantly higher than that. The mutual aid required year to date, that means all of our ambulances were on calls and somebody else actually had to come into our district to take a call. So it's not just that somebody else was closer, that means we were truly out of resources. So 25 times year to date, I think 24 of them, I think, were the city of Madison, and I believe Belleville was one of them. So that number continues to grow. That was 14 as of last year, if we compare that to last year. I did pull the aging report out of here normally, and I will share that next month when we switch over to our new billing company. They're working on it, right? There's not a substantial change from what you saw last month. Based on our cash on hand, we have received all of our municipal funding for the second half of the year. So based on where we were from last year, all of the information is up there. We have based by purchasing additional training items. as well as I'm trying to think what else we've done with our FAP funds. We've upgraded all of our CPR mannequins. Some new regulations come out, or I guess guidance has come out from the American Heart Association training centers that we now have to have mannequins with feedback devices, which is actually phenomenal. But we've actually had to purchase new CPR mannequins. So using the rest of our FAP fundings, that's why you see 0 in the line there. We should get that funding here in the next couple of months for the next fiscal year. So I'll get up and... This is something we've talked about in the past. I'd just like to share it right as far as what the annual meeting looks like. So where are we going in the future? These are dates that we have seen before. If we look historically, right, from 2001 is when we actually went to a full-time ambulance service. Until then, we were dependent on a combination of full-time and volunteers still way back in 2001. Shortly thereafter then, we bumped up to a second full-time ambulance just by moving that about 500 calls a year in 2003. Sat there for a really long time as we continued to grow, and many of you are part of that 2019, putting that third ambulance in service up at South Sayin Road. And then this is where we're looking at for the future as we continue to grow. So 4,500 to 5,000 calls, right? We're probably going to hit 5,000 calls in 2024. I think we can still manage that. I've shared with you in the past, about 1,000 calls, 1,000 to 1,500 calls is what the kind of industry estimate is for one ambulance service, or one ambulance, right, per ambulance to manage. Being perfectly honest, that is not a scientifically based number whatsoever. It is truly just kind of what is out there as far as industry-wide is 1,000 to 1,500 calls per ambulance. So 5,000 calls, that's going to get us up to ambulance number 4 within probably 2 years. And then projecting out, because I feel like it's far away, but it's not that far away, 2030, 7 short years from now, we're going to be hitting 5,500 to 5,800 to 6,000 calls. So actually looking at probably adding additional ambulances on then. What does that look like here? We've talked about it in the past, so it is in that budget this year, making its way through the municipal process. I believe we've negotiated most of those hurdles, and it's going to stay in there. But bringing on next year a second deputy chief of EMS training and operations. Really, my goal for that chief is going to be predominantly training. As we've kind of moved into some additional equipment, our ultrasound units, our ventilators, our IV pumps, just the technology that we've been able to acquire requires an additional person to really just come in here and focus on those 21 full-timers, 2 old-timer administrative people, as well as our 14 new medics and all those new people coming out of school to just really make sure that we are using that equipment to the greatest capability we have. It's not harmfully, it's not poorly impacting patient outcomes, but we're using it like we should in that cooperation with UW. Right. Other things we've talked about, 2025 is that peak time ambulance. Eventually, that ambulance is going to need to go to a 24-hour ambulance. So shooting for 2028, right, somewhere in there, it's going to be needed 24 hours. And by 2030, adding that 5th ambulance. I brought it up last year. I think my numbers are still accurate that the inpatient rehab unit in Fitchburg here is going to be opening next month. Oak Hill has opened up their assisted living unit here earlier this year. I believe we have 4 more senior housing, assisted living, memory care facilities in Fitchburg alone, and I know there's 1 more on the docket for the city of Fitch-Rona. So as you kind of saw from that heat map, that is our clients. So we're going to do nothing but continue to grow over the next 5 years for those calls of service. I'd like to hit this up. This is what I demonstrated for you last year. I showed you last year. We have all of this equipment. I didn't want to haul it all up here. So stop by the station anytime and take a look at this. Those power stair chairs are in service. The handful of predominantly the firefighters who normally have to carry that patient up the stairs love to press the button. It powers that patient up the stairs. We've replaced 2 of our cots. They are a little bit of heavier cot, but they function much better and have a few more bells and whistles on them. Our IV pumps are 100% in place. We're using those and helping with patient care. And then our ATV has gotten a lot of use. I should have looked at the hours. I think we've gotten up to about 30 or 40 hours on it in just the handful of months we've had it. Had it out at Epic, out at the Alliant Energy Center. We've used it at our cross-country meets. I think we used it for one of the triathlon in Verona as well. So, and then they used it out at Luke Bryant, the concert out in Brooklyn, kind of a whole fleet of UTVs out there. So it's gotten some use. Deer Grove has borrowed it once as well. They had a rugby tournament, I think. So as opposed to driving those big ambulances on the field, worked phenomenal. Alluded to it just a little bit ago, our 2024 EPIC grant. We actually got those fundings and that funding, and those are actually sitting in my office. We met yesterday with our medical group, the medical docs from UW, who are going to help us with the rollout here. So working on putting some pre-course work together and then working on getting the hands-on sessions. But another tool that has just phenomenal capabilities for us, for pre-hospital statewide. Right now, the scope of practice I have shared with you is looking at cardiac function. So in those cardiac arrest patients, right, is it truly a patient in cardiac arrest or is it a low flow state, right? It means just we're not able to feel pulses, but their heart is actually beating. So changing that plan of treatment a little bit. Potential for this, right now the state limits us to doing that. With partnership with UW, there's kind of, I want to say endless, but there's so many other uses for ultrasound that we can use for trauma exams. Looking for tube placement in airways, looking for collapsed lungs, looking for free blood. So starting in these baby steps, but moving significantly forward with that ability for us. There's not very many agencies in the state who've got this, so I think we're going to kind of partner up with some of those other agencies and really lead the way and push the state to allow us to do some more stuff. What's in the future for us? Lots of things that we can still continue to do. One of those things is point of care lab testing. Right now, essentially what we're limited to do in the field is testing a blood sugar, which gets us where we need to be for most of those patients. There's so many other options we can do out there. One of the things I'd like to do with reviewing those call times with you is that you see, right, so I said it's about an hour and a half from the time we get dispatched to the time we get to the hospital. Our average transport times are 15 minutes. When we reach out to that 90th percentile, we're up to 20 and 25 minutes, right? If we are intercepting, we can be up to that 20 and 30 minutes. So if we have patients, say, who have potentially, we think they may have heart attacks, point of care lab testing would actually allow us to run more labs in the field. Patients who we believe are septic, patients who we have major trauma, we'd actually be able to do bedside testing and call those labs into the hospital ahead of time. And say, right, as opposed to just now doing clinical evaluations, which we still need to reinforce and still need to be doing solid clinical evaluations. But now we'd be able to call in and say, right, I believe this patient is septic, and now I actually have lab values to help prove it 20 minutes ahead of time, right? So it actually can just lead us down some more pathways. So the combination of doing lab testing, putting with that clinical evaluation, yet not impeding, right? I don't want to sit at somebody's home for 15 minutes when I know I can be at the hospital in 15 minutes. So it's making sure that we're using our tools appropriately. Other things we can do that are out there for as far as employee safety, as oxygen cylinder lifts. Right now, to change that there's a big oxygen tank that we carry in the side of the ambulance. There's the potential to get a piece of equipment that'll actually lift those pieces of equipment into the ambulance to be secured. And we're not actually, as we try to prevent our back injuries in our providers, something that they'll be able to do for us. And then our respiratory fit testers, as we know, the COVID was a huge deal with us. And to prevent that and other infectious diseases, we need to wear N95 particulate matter masks. Those masks ideally should be fit tested to make sure that it fits your face appropriately. To do that, we currently borrow a machine from either Dane County or McFarland or a couple other agencies that have them. So potentially investing in our own to continue to do that on an annual basis. So looking at the future of what we can do for our staff and patients. Any questions for me about the chief's report, where we're going?
Can you go back to the graph that shows our growth over the last several years? Yeah, that one. Is there any discussion, is there any discussion about ways to limit our growth? I mean, if we're a business, this would be great. We'd be saying, look at us, we're growing so fast, but we're actually an expense for all the communities. is the ambulance with, you've said most of our, or many of our calls go to the elderly homes, assisted living or nursing homes. Maybe we don't need an ambulance for a lot of those. I've talked to you about this before. There are people that have fallen out of a chair and we put them back up in the chair or stuff.
So oddly enough, we were actually having that conversation with Deputy Chief Dostalik today. With the addition of that second deputy chief, as much as I really want that person to focus on training, the other goal of that is actually to help assist some of the stuff that Jeff and I are just truly at capacity about what we can do.
Yeah.
And one of the proposals, right, Jeff had brought out, right, really just right now it is coffee table discussion. But if we have another administrative position helping us with that training, that allows that person to as well take over a lot of the quality insurance, the data collection that Jeff is currently doing, and move it into that wheelhouse that will help drive training, which then alleviates some of Jeff's time to potentially start doing some more public relations thing, as he's going to talk about fall prevention. But as we say every month, one of the first or second reason we are called out is falls. So is there an opportunity there for somebody to create this program in our district, essentially to go do lift assists, to help prevent falls to begin with? I think stretching to a City of Madison type CARES program for mental health, to the extent that Madison has it. I don't know that we have the sustainability of that, but the City of Fitchburg, right, with their police, they already share a social worker with the senior center and the police department for some mental health issues. I know Verona is very interested in that. I had that talk with Chief Dresser the other day. I think there's opportunities there, and I think the second deputy chief might help bring some of that to fruition. I know I have had a couple alders in the past reach out to me with one of these concerns, right? Because as we continue to grow, those are the places we go. One of the things it was hard to pull. I mean, anecdotally from the map, you see where we go. I was able to pull some data just because of 2001 Traceway is truly the last, right, senior housing facility that was built in the city of Fitchburg based on a time frame in the last 5 years. The call volume to that facility only added, I think it was less than 1% of our call volume based over the course of 3 years. So to say that senior housing itself is causing the call volume increase, I can't say that reliably. The information I could pull is that over the last 10 years, our patient population over the age of 60, from I think it was 10 years ago, has grown by 10%. So district-wide, our patient population is getting older, not necessarily the facilities, if that kind of makes sense. But so I think the short answer to your question that was really long is no. But I think there's some opportunity here to help intervene in some of those EMS calls at a much lower level.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Dostalik to talk about the fall prevention program real quick.
Thank you. That's a really good question as far as, you saw in Chief Anderson's slides about sick persons and falls, and I think sometimes that flips from month to month. We kind of look at sick persons as that COVID era where that was really the only bucket that those calls could go into. I know that the Falls Prevention Task Force that I participate in with the City of Fitchburg and Safer Communities, falls is a big issue across the county. Falls is also a big issue across the state. So much so that the UW Trauma Center has put that on there. This is going really fast. Can we back it up? There we go. The UW Trauma Center is concerned about the number of patients that are being brought into the facility and how are they going to handle those patients in the future. So it's been an agenda at the state level, and it's certainly an agenda here. So if we can go back to So just a slide, every 11 seconds, an older adult is seen in the emergency department for falls, and we believe that many of those are preventable. So in the call volume for falls over the last couple of years, you can see that it has increased. That is 2022, not 2023, for 800 calls. But it certainly is going to surpass that in the next couple of months. So as you can tell, that's the biggest number of calls. 14 to 18% of the calls that we go on are falls. Most of us would think that those calls come from our assisted living or nursing homes, but in fact they come from multifamily homes and residential single-family homes. So I think our prevention strategy is going to have to look at how do we communicate to those residents that they can do a home assessment. There are agencies in Dane County, especially with Safer Communities, to go through and help people look at their homes, move those throw rugs, get those anti-slip things in the bathtubs and at their homes and hand railings. So that's I think the biggest task that we're going to have in order to prevent falls. So as far as a couple of strategies that we can use for preventing those is looking at or helping people learn how to have flexibility and strength, being able to work through the programs, Only Leaves Can Fall, learning how to teach them to exercise at home, even the simple things of standing up and holding onto chair rails when they do that, I think are important. Talking to their healthcare provider, there are fall assessment, risk assessment forms out there, and most of your providers have those assessments. You can also go to Safer Communities website under their falls prevention area, and you can do a risk assessment yourself on there, or have your family members help you. Regularly review medications with your doctor and your pharmacist. So a lot of times older adults either don't take the necessary medicines or they cut back because of cost, and that does affect balance. It affects nighttime stuff, and so going through that, those medication reviews, and that might be an area where a community paramedic position can sit down with a resident and go through their medications with them. I know when my dad was around, I went through his medications one year, and he had 5 different types of medications for the same thing. None of his doctors were communicating, and he just kept filling the prescriptions. And in the end, we were able to go through and eliminate duplications and accidental overdosing or accidental underdosing of their medication. So I think reviewing medications is an important part of trying to reduce some of the falls. And then talking to family members, making sure that everybody's on the same page are important ways to help. And we talk about it as being an older adult, Patrick, the old guys here getting up and running calls, but it really isn't just an older adult issue. It is an issue across the board. And while we think about falls as being, somebody that is older and at home, and in a lot of cases it is, falls are a risk for everyone. And so trying to take those necessary steps, doing a public campaign like we're trying to do on Facebook with Safer Communities. October is Fall Preventions Month, so they've got a lot of information that's coming out as well, and you'll see some information coming onto our new website. So it's an important topic, and we hope that people, if they have questions, they can reach out to us. They can go on to the website and fill out an information form, and we can help them through what they need to get through.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief Dostalek? That's helpful. Thank you.
Seeing none, I'll keep driving, and then I'll make this fairly expeditious because I know you have all seen this before. So in front of you, so just a quick review of our 2024 capital improvement projects and an update. The only capital improvement projects we have are vehicles. So here's that latest update. 2020 2023 would have been a replacement year for us to replace that oldest ambulance based on just everything going on in the world and supply chains. Though that was ordered last year, we knew we weren't going to get it this year. It will come next year. Knowing, as you have just seen, right, we know we're going to be expanding the fleet here in the next couple of years, or expanding staffing. We're going to need that extra truck in there. So starting next year, when that truck comes, we will expand our fleet to 6 versus 5. So we'll actually add Medic 41 in there. So then it'll actually live in, our ambulances will live here for 12 years. Currently, I shouldn't say currently, as of a year ago, $415,000 for an ambulance that is stocked. It's roughly $315,000 for the ambulance and about another $100,000 to put stuff in it. Of that $100,000, there are 5 items that account for almost $80,000 of that $800,000 or that $100,000. A cot, a monitor, a ventilator, and three radios, I think, are those items. That alone in 2022 was a $45,000 increase literally from the year before. So kind of a little bit scared here. It's on my radar. 2023 would have been a replacement year. So next year in 2024, we'll get our 2023 ambulance. We're actually going to work on getting the 2025 one earlier, because if I ordered an ambulance today, I wouldn't actually see it until 2026. So that 2027 ambulance, which is scheduled to be how many years out from now, would be our next replacement. I have been told by the end of, not by the end of this year, but probably within the next 6 months, we'll be looking to speccing out a 2027 ambulance and getting our name in the queue if we want to see it in 3 years from now. So that's on that horizon. And that's what that says right there. I did stick, now it's not the exact same anti-idle technology in our current ambulance, which takes up an entire side compartment. But there is anti-idle technology in the 2 new ambulances that will help as we try to be, as kind of all of our municipalities have made that commitment to be go green or support the environment. What anti-idle does is essentially when we pull up on a scene, put that vehicle in park, there's a timer that is set in there. Our current timer is set to 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, the ambulance will shut off. But there is a system on it that keeps the back of the ambulance, right, the patient care compartment, keeps all the electrical items on. So it keeps our radios on so we can still communicate. More important, being in the state of Wisconsin, it keeps the heat running, it keeps the air conditioning going. If the emergency lights are on, that is shut off because we don't want to take that risk that we're actually having to, or an ambulance is dying in the middle of a call. But it actually does then, we have added it up, and it does over the course of a year, if we look at that fractal time, based on the amount of time we sit there idling, it does shut an ambulance or save idling a fairly significant amount of time. Other 2 vehicles that we have are the fleet replacements of our 2 administrative vehicles that Jeff and I both use to essentially drive around the district in, move things around. We respond to calls with them as well, and as you've seen that call volume go up, that is one of the numbers I do report to you. I feel like we're responding out and assisting on calls or first responding significantly more than we probably have in the last 4 years. The next one of those vehicles is to be replaced is the 2010 Expedition. So I truly believe we can get about 20 years out of those vehicles. So it's not going to be until 2030 when we'll be looking to replace that vehicle, the next vehicle. Again, I'll try to get through this pretty quick because you have all seen this before. But our 2024 operational budget is based off of this fee schedule. We did not up it for this fee schedule was not reviewed earlier in the year. Next month, it will be on the agenda to review our rates. I've got some guidance from our billing company about some of the suggestions that they have to get us set up to probably make it a little bit easier to bill in the future and to bring us up. They've actually looked to see what EMS services in our area have done and have suggestions for us. So that'll be on the agenda next month to look at the fee schedule for next year. So you've seen this. This did not change from that original budget that's approved. It's an estimated $1.6 million in run revenue. It is a little bit higher based on the higher call volume, as well as increased reimbursement from medical assistance. With the little hiccup caused a couple of years ago by my bad math, that overestimated our actual run income for a couple years in a row. You can see those 3 middle red years where we overestimated the actual income because of the significant increase in call volume, and then fixing that formula to be back to something more reasonable. We've actually been significantly over our run income last year and probably this next year as well. So there's actually the way I have Michelle look at my math. I look at my math, and we use 2 different estimates to predict what this is. One based on a formula of what we've seen in the past statistically based on what we charge for runs, as well as actual dollars in, and then we split the middle between the 2 of them. So it ends up being about $427 for every time the ambulance leaves. This did not change from what you originally saw. This is wages. That includes 3% increase in the represented staff, 3% increase in the non-represented staff, an additional deputy chief position, and another 6 months of an EMT intern of that paid internship, as well have 2 of them for a full year starting next year. Other increases that you'll see in here, things we have talked about before, the big ones: fuel, oil, lubrication, repair parts and replacement parts, as well as medical supplies. Those are always the ones that jump. In addition to, we'll be adding that 6th ambulance into the fleet, the tail end of next year. That continues to be a moving target. Last big increase that we see in here will be medical maintenance equipment. As we add more equipment, I have started subscribing to the preventive maintenance programs for our cots. As I shared with you about a year ago, we had a catastrophic hydraulic failure on one of our cots. It was a $6,000 repair, which was enough to pay for an entire 3 years worth of preventive maintenance. We now have that on all of our cots. So it has been really helpful, as well as we just had the battery die in one of our auto load systems the other day. The repair person was actually down in New Glarus, and within 2 hours, that ambulance was back in service, and that was covered under that preventive maintenance contract. So it went up a little bit next year to absorb the cost of all of those cots, but truly in the long run, I think it will pay off. So at the end of the day, that's what it ended up being. This would be the one difference that you didn't see from the original budget that is approved, that we just approved here about an hour and a half ago, and that is the reserve funding. Last year there was $58,000 put in there to bring that reserve budget up to maximize the tax levy limit for this year's budget. So we originally took that out as of the meeting a while ago, because that opportunity has presented itself again this year to maximize that tax levy limit. $41,000 is in the budget, again, that we would not have seen a couple months ago. This has been sent out to the municipalities and has been presented into their normal budgeting process that is well on its way. So this is what the new numbers look like. I shouldn't say new numbers. This is old, the original one. We have not changed what we anticipate for income. But adding that $41,000 in there, this is what it is at the end of the day. So based on the equalized value, you'll see each one of the municipalities changed just a little bit. So this is what it looks like, the new distribution. Fitchburg, I believe, went up. I'm guessing. It's whatever that $41,000 was divided by that equalized value. So this is what that little bit of change is from what we've seen before. And this is explaining the tax levy limit exemption, right? There's the state statute that says we are allowed to do that as an EMS agency. There's the crazy formula that Misty from Fitchburg and Brian from Fitch-Rona understand how that works. It just says, yes, the district, again, qualified for the use of this because of the consumer price index was so high. By adding $41,000 in there, we were able to increase it enough that we can remove the increase of Fitch-Rona's not tax burden, but the cost of Fitch-Rona to the city of Fitchburg, can exempt it from their tax levy limit. And to maximize that, that's where that $41,000 came. To do that, all 3 municipalities have to adopt a resolution. At this point, Fitchburg, I know, has approved it to go to Finance Committee. The city of Verona has approved it, and I know it's on the agenda for the town next month. All three municipalities have to agree to adopt the resolution to allow it to happen. The municipalities do not have to use the tax levy limit. So there's really no harm, no foul in approving it. The 2023 audit took us, our reserve is up to 19%. Based on the intergovernmental agreement, we have to have 15 to 25%. So our reserve is there. Putting that $41,000 in there would bring us up to that $25,000 reserve cap. So in the future, should our reserve be higher than 25%, it will actually come back to the commission to discuss with their municipalities where that funding is. It doesn't mean Patrick gets to go out and buy a new command vehicle for himself or Jeff. Right? It means that that funding can either be removed to another assigned fund, such as post-retirement healthcare, or it can actually help to offset future operational budgets. And that is spelled out in the intergovernmental agreement about how that works. But as I had mentioned in the previous meeting, right, what does this do for us? It allows the municipalities to exceed the tax levy limit. It sets the future budgets up for growth because now that $41,000 is in the budget for next year that essentially can be reallocated towards potentially more paramedic positions or some other purchase that may pop up. And the future, again, may support other assigned funds. I mentioned the post-retirement healthcare. That's those last items that you see when I give you the monthly report. $250,000, $260,000, I think, is sitting in there when our employees retire per WRS through the Wisconsin retirement system. When they retire, they get paid out what is ever in their sick time into a post-retirement healthcare account that they will then manage. I have 5 employees that could retire today. And then over the next 5 years, that number will get pretty close to doubling. So that $260,000 sitting there for post-retirement healthcare is going to go really quick here in the next 5 to 10 years. So that is something else we have started. There is a line item in there that has started putting some funds in there, but that funding is going to start to get tapped out here in the next 10 years. That is the budget.
Question on the rescue. You talked about the lights turning off after 5 minutes.
Yes.
Is that a wise thing when they're out on the highway or in an intersection?
No. When the emergency lights are on, it does not shut off.
Okay.
So as long as the emergency lights are on, it overrides the anti-idle system and it won't shut off. So if the emergency lights are not on, so just normal day-to-day operations, putting it in a parking lot, then the anti-idle will kick in.
Okay.
So yeah, there is. If they're in emergency mode, correct. It doesn't shut off because nobody wants to take the risk that it's not going to turn back on.
Any other questions for the chief? Thank you. That was informative and helpful. Next agenda item is other business as allowed by law. Is there any other business to share? Seeing none, hearing none, let's move on to, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? All opposed signify by saying nay. Nay. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.